In this video, we are going to use sum and difference formulas to find the exact values of trig functions involving sums or differences of special angles. So we're going to find the exact value of the sine of pi over 12. And to do that, we're going to take a look at our unit circle. On our unit circle, we see that we don't have anything with a denominator of 12, which makes it kind of hard to visualize where are we going to find this number. So what we really want to do is we want to look at the unit circle being split into twelfths. So here we can see a unit circle that has been divided into twelfths. And as we look to the one-to-one correspondence, we see that there is not one-to-one correspondence for pi over 12, 5 pi over 12, 7 pi over 12, 11 pi over 12, 13 pi over 12, 17 pi over 12, 19 pi over 12, and 23 pi over 12. So we want to avoid using those values. So I'm looking at this and I want to know what two numbers could I subtract that would leave me with pi over 12? And there's lots of options here. I could take 15 pi over 12 and subtract it from 14 pi over 12. I could take 9 pi over 12 and subtract 8 pi over 12. But I think for what we're doing, I'm going to want to stay with some smaller values. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take 4 pi over 12, which is pi over 3, and we're going to subtract 3 pi over 12, which is pi over 4. So I can rewrite the sine of pi over 12 as the sine of pi over 3 minus pi over 4. So here we can see that we want to use a difference formula for sine, which is the cosine of u times the sine of u times the cosine of v minus the cosine of u times the sine of v. And so we can go ahead and plug in our pi over 3 and our pi over 4 into those spots. And so now we can look on our unit circle and we can find the values that we need. So remember that we're going to be looking at pi over 3 and we're going to be looking at pi over 4. So we want to know what is the sine of pi over 3. And the sine of pi over 3 is radical 3 over 2. So radical 3 over 2. But we also need to know what is the cosine of pi over 4. And we see that the cosine of pi over 4 is radical 2 over 2. So we want to plug that in as well. So we write radical 2 over 2, subtract, and now we want to find the cosines of those values. So what is the cosine now of pi over 3? And the cosine of pi over 3 is 1/2. And we also want to know the sine of pi over 4. And the sine of pi over 4 is radical 2 over 2. And now we want to multiply those together. We're going to get square root of 6 over 4 minus the square root of 2 over 4. We have like denominators, so we can combine those. And we're going to get the square root of 6 minus the square root of 2 all over 4. And that doesn't reduce any farther, and so we see that the exact value of the sine of pi over 12 is radical 6 minus radical 12, radical 6 minus radical 2 all over 4.